Ignorance is bliss. Learning is a crime. Live in a hovel.
Welcome back to Adaptive Difficulty, where we ask and answer the question, ancient Greek myths aren't movies, but what if they could be?
This week, we are finishing our Odyssey foray with the last 8 books of Homer's epic and discussing several adaptations.
I am Josh.
And I'm Cameron. I guess we should apologize for the delay in the episode, but we're getting back on track.
Yeah, stuff happens. And I got Tempest tossed over to I don't know, it wasn't the Sirens Island, because maybe the Lestrygonians, because I was in a small, reasonable sedan and got hit by a big, hulking truck.
Oh, see, I was interpreting it as the Lestrygonians were like your insurance company, and they were just beating down on you, being like, we don't want to pay for this thing.
Well, my wife's been dealing with the insurance company, but maybe the Lotus Eaters, because it takes forever.
It does take forever.
This is the hard-hitting, hilarious, observational car insurance satire that you come to our podcast for.
Yeah, it's just as funny as Zootopia's DMV scene with the sloths.
Yeah, I like the Zootopia DMV scene.
I do too. I will say, my own experience with DMV has never been that bad.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't work at a DMV, but I worked at a very close equivalent to a DMV, and we were relatively faster, I think, than the stereotype.
I feel like people don't come prepared for what they need, and especially for like car stuff where they need like insurance or they need proof of whatever.
Yeah.
And so they get sent back and forth between places, and that takes up a lot of time. But if you know what you're doing and know where to go, it's a lot faster.
Well, the place I worked at printed people very sensitive documents, and the amount of people who insisted that if they show up and insist that it's their name, they should just be able to get that document with no proof was astronomical. Several per day.
I mean, people just fundamentally don't have a good idea of how the systems of government that they live under work.
And I will tell you, they did not like it if you said, would you want me to just give it to some random person who came in here and said the same thing as you?
Now you're being condescending, Josh.
Well, I wasn't saying it that way, but so these 8 books of the Odyssey are interesting to me because, as we mentioned, what feels like months ago now in our first episode on the Odyssey, this is the first chunk of the book we read where I had not ever read any of it myself.
Oh yeah, because we did that fucked up teaching strategy.
When we were in school, we had the same teacher for the Odyssey, and we read half of it, and then we split up the last 12 books into small groups, so nobody actually read or understood all of the back half of the Odyssey. We read and did not understand 1/12 of the back half of the Odyssey.
I think they were 6 groups in two book chunks, is I think what happened.
Oh, okay. Something like that, anyway. But mine were when he meets Eumaeus for the first time on his return, so those happened around 13 through 16. But here we basically have... This is really the meat and potatoes of his return home and his fight with the suitors.
Significantly less epic.
Well, it's just as epic as the rest by actual definition, but not what we think of as epic.
It was no John Wick sequence.
Well, no. There's an action scene at the exact same place as the Nolan movie.
Yeah, but it feels less impactful. I think some of that comes down that action sequences in written work tends to be very distant, just because of how the nature of the media worked.
I don't know. I liked it.
I didn't say I hated it.
And it may be, I mean, my translation was possibly written in a more immediate way than yours. I don't know. We'd have to compare them side by side to see what impression they give of the action scene. But that does bring me to my first point, which is going to start at the very end of the book, which is at the very end, after everything's settled and he's reintroduced himself to all the people he needs to, there's a couple suitors who are like, we're going to make one last charge against this guy and take him down. And so it's like Odysseus, Laertes, Telemachus, so like 3 generations plus like a couple slaves join them. In my head, I was like, this is so the last scene of like an ensemble action movie. It's like the last scene of The Incredibles.
Yeah.
Some new threat shows up and then they all pose and the credits run. is a little different in the Odyssey because they actually do just kill the guy who's trying to attack them and then it ends. But I could see it if it ended like one stanza earlier, it would have been exactly like that. And I thought that was funny and interesting.
I find that scene interesting in the context of Nolan's film because like it doesn't happen in Nolan's film. And I think it's mostly because the gods aren't present characters for Nolan, and they're very prevalent there because this is the part where Zeus sends down a thunderbolt, and Athena's there with them, and is very clearly like the gods are putting their foot down and saying, no more fighting about this kind of thing, which is about as absolute a command as you can get.
Yeah, it's a bookend of the opening of the story where the gods are like negotiating who gets to do what and in this situation. And
I saw something, and maybe I heard this from you, that this book was written, or this part of the story was written significantly after the other parts, and it comes out as like a way of like tying up loose ends.
You did not hear that from me, but I wouldn't be surprised. It does feel like it has some Return of the King energy where it ends in book 23 and book 24. So I could see that.
Well, I think maybe the person who was telling this was like, the idea was he finishes it with book 23, and then some people, some fans, I guess, were like, but what about the suitors' families? Wouldn't they also be upset? And then he kind of adds this onto it.
And I think that the Odyssey and the Iliad are both, it's sort of like Bible verses. They're not, the book splitting is not an inherent feature of the surviving text. That's just an agreed upon convention to help people read it and study it. That would make sense. And I mean, if it really is, I'm not speculating it is an oral story, then it would make sense that he's getting feedback and incorporating it. So that's interesting. Do you have any overarching thoughts or anything you have to get off your chest about these books?
So I already mentioned that part. I find the Penelope recognizing Odysseus scene interesting, and just in terms of what we expect from Penelope, in terms of she's very like skeptic and very questioning of him, but also clearly wants it to be him. And I find that exchange to be very engaging. I feel a lot of emotion in how she's acting and how she is being very reserved and very cold.
To me, what I came across with Penelope, first of all, this really is Penelope's chunk of the book. Mm-hmm. The same way the first 8 books are Telemachus's and the middle is Odysseus's. This was the first set of scenes in the book where I really felt Penelope had a distinct character, and I saw why that character was Odysseus's wife, and like their similarities to each other. So her whole scheme with the bow challenge, revealing nobody is Odysseus or who Odysseus is, and telling the lie about having the bed moved because she knows it would provoke the real Odysseus to admit that it's him. And then even there's like a metaphor they use in the bed chapter after it's revealed. Homer does the thing with the aside, the metaphors that he goes into. And the metaphor then is someone who's lost at sea finding land because Poseidon has finally let them. That's literally a direct, he's saying, oh, Penelope in her own way has just had the same experience as Odysseus, because that's literally what happened to him.
I can't believe he's referencing his own story. Did we call that an allusion?
No. But on that point, because I have been taking Homer to task for his little storytelling is the most powerful force of all devices. The way that they reunite and then the poem is like, and then they went and fucked. And it said, and when the couple had enjoyed their lovemaking, they shared another pleasure, telling stories. Gag.
I mean, like, it's just pillow talk, Josh. They can't smoke a cigarette that doesn't exist yet, Josh.
They definitely had some shit to smoke in ancient Greece.
Yeah, but it's not a cigarette, so it's not as cool and nifty. And they recognize that fact, which is why they didn't
smoking
bother
that
wasting time.
Shit that made Odyssey.
No.
Smoking that shit that made Telemachus.
That one I like more. I can't explain why, I just do.
So that was my number one takeaway, basically, was this was really where I felt Penelope came into her own as a character and not just a brooding woman / prize for Odysseus to return to.
Do you find, I guess it's just on my mind, do you find the Nolan version of this scene impactful in the same way? In the sense that she's asking him about like what he wore, the little Athena pin?
I prefer the bed because it lets Penelope be clever, for one thing. But Odysseus in the movie is not really clever in the same way that he is in the poem either. So
that's true.
I guess that tracks. Honestly, I think it is kind of hand in hand with why he doesn't do the Cyclops thing in his movie, which I think the whole bed trick just feels very fairy tale in how it resolves. It's so riddly and clever. So that must be his opposition to it. But I personally like it and would have preferred it be the way that it is in the poem. I think that bothers me more than the Cyclops, actually.
Interesting, because I know everyone was just bitching online about the Cyclops and it not being there.
I'm not saying they're wrong. I am saying the Cyclops is like the most famous scene, and they do that sequence basically beat for beat in Percy Jackson and the Sea of Monsters. So everybody knows about it and knows to bitch about it.
Is that scene played straight in Percy Jackson? I could have sworn there was a twist to it.
I don't know. I was in middle school last time I actually read that. So I just know the second book is basically the Odyssey. One thing that bothered me maybe a little bit is Odysseus reveals himself, has the fight with the suitors, kills them all, and then there's like 12 slave girls left alive, and they're like, go get the women, make them clean everything up, and then let's kill them. And they kill them by like wrapping them around a pole all together with one piece of rope so that they all get hung.
Mm-hmm.
It just seemed like the suitors deserved it, quote unquote, as far as the rules of a narrative go. But it just seemed like an especially brutal treatment of women.
Well, these are the handmaidens that also went along with tormenting Odysseus when he was portrayed as a beggar. So they are, again, breaking that kind of commandment of being nice to your guest.
It just seemed like there was maybe an element of relishing how it was being done to them, making them perform quote unquote women's work and then doing it, like adding an element of ridicule to it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not going to change anything about the Odyssey. So, I'm not like frothing mad about it. It was just a little odd.
I don't know, Josh. What if it had a funny, tiny robot companion for Telemachus?
Does this happen in Ulysses 31?
Yeah, he has a funny, tiny robot friend called No-No.
Yeah, no, I mean, do they murder like 12 slave women this way?
Oh, so it's actually very funny to me. One of the episodes is Ulysses and Telemachus in the 31st century being sent back in time to the original Ulysses and Telemachus so they can help those events happen.
Well, let me clarify the premise here. Ulysses 31 is a sci-fi and French anime adaptation of the Odyssey.
Yes.
Am I following so far?
Yes.
But really, it's just like the characters from the Odyssey then go on sci-fi adventures. It's not necessarily the structure of the Odyssey.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of is, because there's episodes, like one of the episodes I watched was the Lestrygonian episode, and that involves a man, or an alien, I guess, who has like a prism that shrink or grow things, which I guess is how they get the idea of the size with the Lestrygonians. And he uses that to enslave a native population on a planet, rules them with an iron fist, and he like keeps he shrinks things down and keeps them in cages, like he is a tiny elephant, which I don't know how there's an elephant in this universe. And there's like a blue whale, and I'm like, again, how are these animals existing in this universe? So he just keeps tiny little things. So that part's there. There's the Lotus Eaters, which are also there. It was another episode I watched. It was kind of bad. And then there's just kind of random bits and pieces of like just random like Greek stuff. There's one...
It sounds Star Trek-y.
Yeah. There's one with the Minotaur. There's one with Atlas. There's just some general Greek stories in there too. And it does occasionally hit like those Odyssey moments. But in this one where they go back in time, the old Ulysses from ancient Greece gets injured, and so he can't string the bow. And so the new Ulysses does it, and Penelope recognizes that it's not her Ulysses, despite everyone else being like, oh, it's Ulysses. And then old Ulysses comes and is about ready to fight all the suitors, and new Ulysses is like, hold on, let me handle this. And so he draws his lightsaber and his little plasma shield and just kind of goes to town, doesn't murder any of them, prevents anyone from dying. So all the suitors are still alive in that universe.
Is there like a butterfly effect since all the rudest people in Greece lived to tell the tale?
I mean, if there is, we get no context of that, because immediately after that, they ascend Telemachus, No-No, the robot, and Ulysses ascend up to the sky.
I believe that's No-No le petit robot, right?
Yes, Josh.
I remember that from the theme song that I watched once.
All the ancient Greeks are like, these people are gods. So it's weird in that universe because the gods actually do exist and are actual characters.
And then they also get convinced that these space people are gods.
Yeah. So like, I don't...
Because usually that would be a premise for, oh, here's an explanation of gods for these people. Like, it was sci-fi all along. But this posits it's both the whole time.
Mm-hmm.
Is there an explanation of why Ulysses, Telemachus, and all the constituent parts of the Odyssey are happening again 4,000 years later?
I don't know. I would imagine it has something to do with the Greek gods just being kind of lazy with their design. I like to imagine that like every century there's a new Ulysses and the gods just torment them. So like this one is Ulysses 31 or whatever. And the old Ulysses is the first Ulysses. They mentioned that in the text. So I just imagine like they just pick a random guy throughout every century.
Oh, so he's Ulysses 1.
I assume so.
I thought 31 was like 3100.
Well, I think it is, but I'm now imagining the case where there's just a sequence of Ulysses every so often just being tormented by the gods and not unable to get home.
And so the gods are real in the present space day too. Like they talk and see the gods in the sci-fi portion of the show.
Yeah, they interact with them. I mean, they're kind of far off and aloof. Like when they get sent back in time, I think it's Poseidon, because I guess Poseidon has this power, sending them back in time. So they see a statue and he like talks and everything. Olympus in that place is like its own like little kind of like mini universe, mini like galaxy that they're like trapped in. I don't know how that squares with the idea of Olympus in ancient Greece. Maybe it's like Percy Jackson where they just move throughout and have their own kind of thing.
Yeah.
I have no idea.
Sort of the last thing that I took away from this reading, as far as adapting it is concerned, and specifically Nolan's Odyssey, is there's two sections. I guess his name is Amphimedon or Amphimedon, who is the suitor that's mad at them. Well, not the suitor. He's the father of Antinous.
Yeah.
And gives a speech about the loss of his son. And also Laertes, who sort of gives a similar, like, mournful speech about the situation. I was reading those and I was like, these would have actually fit really well in Nolan's version, grief and regret angle, so I'm surprised they aren't present in it.
I think the reason he doesn't have them is because he wants that... It feels hard to have the Laertes scene and Antinous' father's scene, because they like so naturally lead to conflict. He's already wrapping the movie up at this point.
Yeah, you have to hurry up and end, yeah.
There's no way to resolve that conflict except by the gods being like, everybody stop, we're done with all of this now.
But I think the Laertes scene could have been good in a way to establish a sense of... Because Laertes has the memory of what it used to be like when it really was the beautiful age. Establish more of the sense of contrast with like what Odysseus has wrought, I guess, if that's kind of what the movie's going for. Not that it fails at that.
I mean, on some level, I think Nolan doesn't believe that there was ever a peak age of Greece or like them being a civilized society, because there is a thing where they're just tossing puppies off the cliff, as we talked about in that kind of in that last episode.
But that's a very minor... I don't think we can hinge too much on that.
I feel like we can. I'm sure there's other ways of thinking about it. I mean, this is also ties into the Circe scene where she's like, men come and go, and it's happening for periods of time, and Penelope's yelling about how she's been on the throne for the last 20 years and no one cares. They need a man to sit on the throne. So I think there's parts of the narrative that are asking us to question this idea of the Greek Golden Age, and I think maybe bringing Laertes into it would complicate it too much or overshadow all the kind of minor elements if you have Laertes being like, oh yeah, it was so great, without having some kind of flashback that kind of underscores that perhaps it wasn't as great as they thought it was.
Fair enough. Okay, I have a very provocative question. Do you have anything else, general thoughts, before I blow this sucker wide open?
No.
Okay, and you'll have to give me a moment to explain myself. Because my question for discussion is, does the Odyssey actually deserve its reputation? And I don't mean that in terms of quality, although if you want to say it's not as good as people think, then feel free.
It's tempting.
But I mean, there's this impression and this belief in society that the Odyssey is the first adventure story. It's the prototype for the hero's journey. It's Star Wars and every Western and Avatar and, every, Moby Dick. Like, it's all these stories all the time. But the actual story of the Odyssey is so much more specific than that. And most stories, if you take what the actual bulk of 80% of the Odyssey is, are not about being at home with your son and then reuniting with your wife and hospitality and cultural norms in that way. So that's my argument, I guess, or at least my starting point. I'm not decided on the answer.
I have several responses to this. The first one is I think it's just a matter of, because it's popular, the specifics fade away, in the sense that because it's a cultural icon and that everyone kind of recognizes and understands and knows, the only way that's really possible is by having a kind of vague description undergirding all of it. Like in the same way that music that's like underground and new, people always say that, oh, earlier stuff is always better. And I think that's true to a degree, but I think part of it comes down to once a band becomes popular, they're now listening to a whole bunch of different people and trying to tailor their opinions to that, and that just inherently makes things more generic. And so this idea that because the Odyssey is a thing to a lot of people, it's just inherently generic in that regard, because that's the only way it can be a thing for a lot of people, is if it is generic. My other thought is, I think this comes down to humans like finding patterns in things. Like, what's the word? Is it pareidolia, or our tendency to see faces in things? Or maybe it's just all patterns? Because I think about this a lot in terms of Beowulf. Beowulf is a poem that was written well before pretty much any major English work, but it was only found and translated after a certain period of time. So there's a whole bunch of English work that comes after Beowulf that can't reference it because no one has read it. And things only start referencing it after it becomes translated. But the Odyssey has been a story that has been translated and been taught and been shown. So it's something that a lot of people have access to, and so they're already comparing it to those things.
To give a frame of reference, I think Beowulf was only really prominently translated around when J.R.R. Tolkien did it.
Yeah.
Mid-20th century. So if you're reading English literature from before then, they're not drawing on Beowulf almost as a rule, which is interesting to think about. But they are drawing on the Odyssey, perhaps.
Yeah.
I guess there's just a sense to me where it's almost like, okay, yeah, it does have elements of an adventure story for those 4 books where he's lost at sea, but someone would have gotten around to that anyway, eventually, probably. Eventually, someone would have been like, well, a character should start doing something and then end up somewhere else.
I dislike that argument because you can apply that to literally any story whatsoever.
But I'm just saying, unless you are doing the deliberate pastiche thing, I feel like it's overstated, maybe.
The part that most people remember are those 4 books where he's talking about his journey.
Yeah.
Part of that comes down to, because that's the part that is, other than stringing of the bow and the murder of the suitor scene, like it's the most action that's happening, because like the first 8 books are Telemachus having a conversation with other people, hearing about war things. And so when people make movies, there's an inherent desire to make things interesting or tell stories that are inherent to make it interesting. And so reaching for the most easily interesting things pulls out those specific moments in the Odyssey, which are why people always think about those things when they think about the Odyssey, and not about the family dynamics, the rules of hospitality, all that kind of stuff. So when they're pulling from the Odyssey, they're pulling those parts from it. And that's kind of, in some ways, filing off the serial numbers of the specifics of the Odyssey for a lot of people. That's why people think about those scenes, because people are drawing from those scenes, because those are the most easily taking and putting somewhere else that aren't so specific.
So, but like, when does it become, because I'm thinking about this, as I mentioned before we recorded, I watched the ODWC, which is Arthur's like 5-minute clip where DW recounts her adventures at sea, which are all of Odysseus's adventures. And obviously, Arthur is just, it's more like reference humor. It's not trying to be an authentic adaptation. But at what point, when this is like getting into like the theory of adaptation and stuff, it's like, I think we cover a lot of adaptations where specific events might be changed pretty significantly, and that tends to like make the fan bases mad and stuff, but they are still trying to get at similar themes. I feel like the Odyssey has a reverse phenomenon where people are very keen to take specific events from the Odyssey and do them pretty faithfully, but they almost never are trying to communicate similar themes to the poem. And so at what point is it no longer an adaptation, even though it looks more faithful than most adaptations do on the surface?
I think any attempt to answer this in like a definitive way is going to run up against all the issues and complexities that surround classification, where you can't really classify things in non-arbitrary ways. I think it comes down to, as long as people recognize it as an Odyssey adaptation, it's an Odyssey adaptation. The extent to which that holds true kind of has to be determined on a case-by-case basis. What's the Supreme Court case about porn? You know it when you see it.
Yeah.
Like, you can't give a good definition of the Odyssey adaptations, and probably all adaptations. Like, you have to be able to look at it and see it and say, oh, that's the Odyssey. And I think for a lot of people, it's going to come down to, honestly, being told it's an Odyssey adaptation. And the reason it's so broad is because we don't care about the specifics anymore.
Okay, I was checking whether that quote about "I know it when I see it" came from the court case against Ulysses, because that would have been very apropos.
It's not.
But no, and I've got to tell you this. The court case that quote is from the Louis Malle film The Lovers, and that was called Jacobellis versus Ohio. The name of the court case against Ulysses was called United States versus one book called Ulysses.
Now, is there a way to turn that court case into a Odyssey adaptation? Now, that's the question. How meta and referential can we get?
Yeah, I don't know. This was at the beginning of the book that when I read Ulysses, this court case was printed in full, the decision in the front of the book, and I think that's been pretty standard whenever they publish Ulysses from now on.
Well, yeah, it's just really good press. I thought you had to be a legal person or legal entity to be able to be sued.
No, because also, if you think the Hobby Lobby case where they were caught like smuggling in artifacts, the case against them was called like United States versus 1 million historic artifacts from the Middle East or something like that.
Okay. I have less faith in the Supreme Court now than I did before.
But this segues into, I was actually going to bring up, because that makes me think again, and this is something I discussed in our first episode, but I actually think Ulysses by James Joyce would generally be seen as a loose adaptation of the Odyssey because it's set in Ireland. There's like no monsters at all. It's a realist novel, quote unquote. It's not realist in like the literary movement, but it's realistic in a sense. Nothing that couldn't happen happens in it. But like thematically, it's about like the social mores of Ireland at the time and this sort of surrogate father-son relationship. So I'm almost like, really, it's more faithful than things tend to be for that reason. And I just think that's, again, I'm asking these questions partly just to spur discussion more than that they are my opinion, but I just think that's interesting.
Well, Ulysses 31, I think, is interesting in this regard, because I think, to some degree, it does comment on social mores, since the last episode, they're going to Hades, and because it's where they can learn, I guess, how to get home. They may have planned on having more stuff if they got a second season, but they only got one season. Maybe they didn't, I don't know. But the final conflict is that Hades is like, cool, I'll send you home. You just have to give up all your crew, and then I'll send you and your son and your robot friend and his little girlfriend home. And he was like, I'm not going to do that. So there's the idea of like Odysseus as being self-sacrificing is funny, because that's not anything that happened in the Odyssey with regards to his crew.
In the book did not and would not have made that decision.
Would not have hesitated. He'd be like, yeah, fuck them. So, I mean, it is still considering talking about social mores. Maybe a matter of it is that it stands out more because it's like the Odyssey's commentary stands out more because it's a culture that's not our own. So it's more in your face or more obvious and less likely to just kind of slip by you.
I think that's part of it. To me, it feels like such an omnipresent feature of the text. Like everything they do is about this. But if I lived there, that might just feel like, well, of course, that's how things are going. And then I would be focused more on other aspects. Sort of like if you watch a movie from a country or a culture that you don't live in, you'll notice, oh, you know, they eat every meal sitting on the floor. But the people in that country don't notice that. And they would notice that we always eat at a dinner table or whatever.
It gets into the localization issue with like anime, because I always think of, and everyone always brings it up, in the Pokemon anime, they were having like onigiri or like rice balls or whatever for like snacks.
Yeah.
And in the American English dub, they were just called jelly donuts because no one in America knew what it was. So it's a matter of like what sticks out for that particular audience is going to be different.
I mean, in Pokemon's case, it's 4 and 5-year-olds, so it makes more sense to, well, I'm sorry, you, and also extremely well-adjusted 28-year-olds.
I'm 27, and I don't like the Pokemon anime all that much.
But it made me think, I saw like a screenshot of Captain America, the Winter Soldier, where he like has a list of things he needs to catch up on in pop culture since he's been unfrozen. And in the US, it's like Star Wars, Star Trek, Harry Potter, JFK, and they changed it for each country. So in Australia, it's Steve Irwin, Crocodile Dundee, but I'm like, he's still American when they show this movie in Australia. So why would he exclusively be catching up on Australian pop culture? If I'm an adult in Australia, and I know kids also watched The Winter Soldier, but if I'm an adult in Australia, I think that would distract me more, being like, oh, Steve Rogers is exclusively into Australia, than if they just left it alone.
All it is they want you to point at the screen being like, ooh, I know that. They want you to do the Leonardo DiCaprio meme.
And see, the problem is that works, and yet if you see the word Star Wars / Star Trek written on a screen, that is the lowest hanging fruit in existence. Do not react.
That is true. I mean, when I saw that scene, I was like, oh, cool, I like the things that he was looking up.
It makes sense it makes sense as a character beat, and it makes sense. It's fun to stop and think, like, what would be like the 10 most important things in pop culture for him to catch up on? But I don't know. It was just, obviously it's not a big deal, but I thought it was odd.
Are localizations, are we considering those adaptations?
I mean, I think the same way that translating, I don't know if you've seen any of this discourse, but the translation I read was by Emily Wilson, and Christopher Nolan in interviews had been saying, like, well, I read Emily Wilson's translation. That was what kind of got me started on the train of thinking of turning it into a movie. And then he, of course, read some other adaptations or translations to get us, more angles on the story and everything. People were trying to be like racist and sexist about this movie before it came out. And people were defending it, saying like, well, it's based on this woman's version of the story, but, it's a translation, so it's authentic. And then the movie came out, and that translator wrote a review where she did not like the movie. So it was just kind of
I mean, that to me
ironic.
Feels more like a shrewd marketing gimmick to sell more versions of her book. She's allowed to like or dislike it, and I don't know her mind. Even if I was only a little bit upset about the adaptation based on supposedly my translation, I would probably ham it up to sell more books. Because, I mean, people were talking a lot about her and her translation and after that interview.
Yeah. Well, she even says in the essay she wrote, like, copies of the Odyssey, including mine, are flying off the shelves. So I think she already had gotten a bump. I mean, I had to pay her $11 for the ebook. So
just pirate that shit.
Emily Wilson, close your ears. I tried and couldn't find it.
Oh. You set out specifically for this adaptation, right? For this translation?
Because I had read, quote unquote, Stanley Lombardo's, and this one was buzzy a few years ago. If I read it again, which I'm sure at some point in my life I will, I'd probably pick an older translation. But anyway, my point is, you're always making choices of what to emphasize and highlight. So it is an act of adaptation in a way, but I feel like this is a very favored topic of internet readers and like literary types, the impossibility of translation. I know enough French to read stuff. I'm not like super fluent. And honestly, having the experience in 2 languages, I've kind of come around to like, as long as the translator is competent, it's not that big of a deal. Like, you probably will get the gist of the story if they're not like an activist translator trying to turn it into their own thing.
I bet it's more of a difference the further apart your cultures are. Like, reading a modern like French novel is probably not as difficult in terms of translating it as translating ancient Greek into an American audience's capabilities.
Right. Yes. But this reminds me of like a comment I saw, because people were talking about the French translation. All the different language translations of Harry Potter are generally well regarded because they paid big bucks to get them done well. The French translation has some very clever stuff in it, including the second book where they have to do the whole riddle with his name. It requires Voldemort's middle name to be Elvis for it to work out in French. Someone was like, but they're speaking, even when you're reading it in France, they live in England, so they're speaking English. So actually, his name should just be the same, and there should be a translator's note that explains the pun. That is obviously a worse option. Like, even if it's more accurate for the audience, the audience is 9 years old, so they don't remember that the characters are speaking English. They think they're speaking French.
That's true.
Just in general, I don't watch a lot of subtitled anime, but I feel like it's a very like anime subculture thing where it's infamous that the translated captions have tons of supplementary notes, right?
I mean, kind of. I think the reason American anime people prefer subs over dubs, which is a statement I have no evidence to back up, but I'm going to continue on with anyway.
That sounds true. It feels right that that's true.
Probably comes from the low quality dubbing that existed for early anime because there was no money in it. And so there was no effort putting into it. So people just instinctively prefer or learn to prefer the subs because it was a better experience.
This is something I've heard more about, like fan subbing, where the work doesn't have subs. And so these amateur translators either aren't clever enough to translate nuance, or they get so obsessed with every nuance and all the information they have that they think they can't translate it into a simple sentence and have to give like basically a footnote in the middle of the subtitles.
This is the Wikipedia or wiki pages affliction on all fandoms' minds.
Yeah. It's just interesting because in professional translation, that's basically seen as completely undesirable. If you can translate something without needing any notes, that's really the ideal. And that person isn't necessarily wrong. Like, there would be an audience for a translation like that. I just think it's interesting.
I think it just comes down to who your audience is. I think fan subs are doing it for fan communities who are more interested in, I don't know, I'm going to say details because I'm going to be diplomatic. Whereas general translators are opting for a more holistic experience, and the holistic experience doesn't want a footnote on the bottom of the page.
You're trying to translate what might it have felt like to read this in the original language, and the original language did not have a bunch of notes.
You're not trying to convey a fact or a detail. You're trying to tell a story which is different. And I'll say it right now, most fans of things, of stories, have absolutely no idea how storytelling works or what's good and what's not good.
Well, I don't need to be mean to people because I do think it's, to some extent, when you're in a niche community like that, part of the appeal is also mastering the knowledge of the community. So I think it makes sense that you might find it more appealing to have all this extra information that you get to learn along the way.
That's probably true. For me, that just reeks of people's desire for perfection.
I was trying to smooth things back over, Cameron. I think I like anime less than you, and I'm being nicer.
No. Everyone knows, and I know this because I'm a Star Wars fan, and I hate Star Wars. In order to love something, you have to really hate it.
It's a shame to see you embrace the dark side, Cameron.
Listen, I've embraced the dark side from Star Wars probably since episode 2.
Okay.
Episode 1 was good. I'll defend that one to the day I die. Josh, don't give me that look. All I know is people should stop complaining, and people's desire for perfection, where if they can't do something and attain like 100% or close to 100%, it's not worth it. I think there's a sickness at the heart of the American mind where that is an aspect of it, and I think it comes from capitalism. I don't think you have to be good at a hobby for it to be worthwhile. I don't think you have to be the best at a hobby for it to be worthwhile. I don't think you have to be the best at a sport for it to be worthwhile. Either you can suck and probably should still play soccer. It's just one of those things where going all the way in on something is not usually the healthiest option. And I think fandoms encourage a going all the way in for a lot of things in a way that makes people actually not like things all that much. And tying it back to Star Wars, this is people who are obsessed with every single detail in the extended universe canon, and their desire to have this absolute knowledge about this thing. And Power Scale are like this too. I'm just going for all the subreddits right now. It becomes so pointless because it becomes overly technical in a way that makes it so that all the language they're using and how they all talk about things are so isolating that they're basically having conversations with themselves and no one else.
In my experience, one of the quickest ways to be enjoying a video game and then no longer want to play it is to visit the subreddit, because everyone there has optimized all the fun out of it, thinks you suck if you don't like immediately 100% it within 10 hours of picking it up.
If you don't choose the best option.
Yeah, it's a very similar mindset, I guess. And maybe we're just mad at Redditors right now.
It's probably fair. I should stop going on Reddit. I think it's probably bad for me because it does just kind of make me angry sometimes.
It's the land of the lotus eaters.
Yeah. I think these people are the ones who exhibit these symptoms the most. Like if you talk to your friend about playing a video game, they're just having fun and they're not caring about choosing the best option. Ignorance is bliss. Learning is a crime. Live in a hovel.
All right. Yeah. That's about all my thoughts. We got to a weird place that I didn't expect, even when
Listen, we're Odysseus traveling along our way. Sometimes we're over here, sometimes we're over there. Yeah. We're just embracing the medium.
So If you know a lot about the Odyssey, shut up. If you know a lot about anything, shut up.
This is not me hating on experts, because I don't think they qualify as experts.
That is the lesson and the moral today.
Yeah.
Have you been reading, playing anything else that perhaps you don't know a lot about, and therefore you are morally okay?
I started reading The Color of Magic, which is the first book in the Discworld series.
I've read it.
And that one has footnotes, which I find interesting, but they're for like humorous reasons.
Footnotes, but no chapters. That jerk.
I just read the first section about the city burning down and why it all happened. I'm not going to say it's bad, but it's not what I expected. I think it will get better as he gets more of a handle on what he's doing and kind of his style for this kind of story. I was a little bored for the first 80 pages.
Have you read any Discworld before?
No.
Because the whole infamous thing with Discworld is do not start with The Color of Magic.
Okay. I just started with the first one because I have OCD.
Yeah. I've read that one back in like middle school, maybe early high school. Yeah, I've read 2 or 3 Discworld books total, including that one. Have you gotten to the bit, I think that has like the insurance joke in it. That's like the one thing I remember from that, where, because it is true, it's like, you know, you're placing a bet every time you pay your insurance that you will get into trouble or destroy, you know, die or whatever. And I think about that every time I deal with insurance.
Yeah. I like that joke. I like the joke where he pulls out the camera and the wizard guy is like, oh, this is so cool. It's probably like freezing light or whatever. And like that's like cool in a way that our magic is not. And it's just a demon painting inside the pictograph. I find that funny.
But there's a lot of sub-series within Discworld.
Yeah.
And they don't really, there's not one ongoing plot thread to follow. So Guards is the one I see recommended the most often, because it's the start of the Night Watch trilogy, I believe is what they call it.
I have that one too.
So
I think I have the first 8 because I got them for Christmas.
Nice.
I know Death is a very big character in a lot of these books and tends to be a fan favorite character. So I don't know. I'll just slowly work my way through them.
I've read The Color of Magic and The We Free Men, which is one of the like children's chapter books. I think I read it during COVID. I was already a little old for it by the time I got to it, but it was fine.
I've been watching a lot of American Dad.
Nice.
Because that show is good, and I'll defend it till the day I die. And it's significantly better than Family Guy.
I haven't ever really watched a significant amount of any of that type of show. I'm actually currently watching Star Trek Lower Decks, which is like the Star Trek adult animation.
Oh, how's that?
I've only watched 2 episodes, but it's good.
I want to watch the Among Us series, because apparently that one was actually very good.
The Among Us TV show?
Yeah.
I've never even heard of that.
Apparently they filmed it, I don't know, like 2 years after Among Us was a famous game, which is wild in terms of pacing for like most studios.
Sort of like how an Angry Birds movie is coming out this year.
The TV show released this year, or maybe it was last year, or towards the end of last year. I think it's on Paramount, and Paramount just kind of like stealth dropped it by accident, like 3 weeks earlier than they were supposed to. But apparently it's pretty good for being an Among Us show.
I have so little free time that I'm always thinking back like 2 or 3 weeks to come up with something in this segment now. I watched The Tree of Life, which I bought the Criterion edition of during their sale. Have you seen The Tree of Life?
That name sounds familiar. I recall watching a movie when I was younger, an animated movie where...
No.
Okay. No, we're thinking of a different thing then. I can't recall what the movie was, and I can remember no details other than a boy climbing a tree and that being like the instigating incident for like him having to do some stuff. Like broke off a branch and it was bad.
The Tree of Life is like more of like an impressionist drama about a guy who is reflecting on his childhood in mid-century Texas, and he has like caring, forgiving mother and a stern but not like irredeemably awful father that he has conflict with. It also has lots of religious and stellar imagery. So this isn't really a spoiler because it happens in the first like 20 minutes. There's like a sequence that just is like the Big Bang and the creation of the universe. And then there's like dinosaurs in the middle of this otherwise realistic family drama. Very good movie. I watched it when I was in high school, and I don't know why I did that other than I had heard of it because I definitely did not really... I don't regret having watched it in high school because I think there's a lot of value in when you get to revisit something and be like, I get it now, you know, and kind of grow with it. But definitely was a lot more interesting as an adult with a child than it was as a high schooler who had only watched a minimum amount of art films in his life. Very good movie. I recommend it.
If I watched movies other than for this podcast, maybe.
Yeah, that's where I'm at with books, but movies I usually can get one or two in every now and then.
Well, I can always dedicate like the last hour when I'm awake to reading like a chapter or whatever, because I don't have a toddler to keep up with.
I think that pretty much does it for us, unless Cameron has any other topics to bring.
No, I think I'm good.
So if you have enjoyed listening to this so far, or if you have not, but you're just a kind person, rate us on 5 stars on whatever platform you are listening to us on. Feel free to leave a comment. Please subscribe if you don't want to miss future episodes. We are on YouTube under the same name. We're also on Blue Sky at adaptivedifficulty.bsky.social. We have an email, adaptivedifficultypod@gmail.com. Feel free to get in touch with us, make suggestions for future episodes, inquire about being a guest if you're interested, anything like that. We'd love to hear from you. Next time, we are finally out of the thralls of the Odyssey. It feels like it's been a while, especially with our delay there. We will be switching gears. I don't know if trains do that, to Murder on the Orient Express.
You should have said switching tracks.
Yeah, scratch that, reverse it. Yes, what Cameron said.
Thanks to everyone who made this podcast possible. Thanks to those who worked on all the adaptations. I never thought I would watch a French-Japanese animation. It was good. I haven't watched all the episodes. I probably will never watch all the episodes, but I appreciate it for what it is. So thanks to you guys for making the world just a little bit more artful. Thanks to you guys, the listeners. It means a lot to have people listen to us. And just keep on keeping on. Join us next time when we discuss the Murder on the Orient Express.